This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
We got a new world champion.
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby. It's the real deal, baby.
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
Ooh, what up? No, it is another Tuesday. It is fight week. It's multiple fight weeks in this joint. We've got the return of our homie Chase, the Militia Kuebler, before he comes back here to Michigan to come be here in the main event for Legends of Combat 1, which Corey and I will be on the microphone for this Saturday, Wayne Hype Athletic Center here in Michigan. It is also fight week for last week's past guest, Sammy the Heat Worthington, who's getting ready to throw hands this weekend on Sunday in Flint, Michigan at the Clarissa Shields fight. And make sure you guys stay tuned because we're also going to be covering all that. So I'll be interviewing the GWOAT and her opponent, Danielle Perkins. So plenty of good things to come from the homies at Knockouts and 3 Counts. But without any further ado, Chase, we appreciate the time, man. How you feeling headed into this weekend, my dude?
Oh, man, I feel pretty good, honestly. It's been a pretty chill cut. Practice has been going great. Obviously, all the cliches that everybody says right before their fight, you know, I'm feeling better than ever. I'm not injured, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, energy's high. I feel really good. Camp's been great. Just everything's been good. Not too much really to say in the bad end, honestly.
You cut a lot when you usually cut?
Most of the time, not really. Not when I was fighting 170. I'd cut somewhere around like 15 pounds, but obviously with me cutting to 55, it's a little bit bigger cut, so from 186 to 55. So it's been a bit, but this time being said, I do have, thankfully, with me living in North Carolina, I got hooked up with a nutritionist and a dietitian. So not only am I got everything planned out to a T, what I should be eating, when I should be eating it. I also have a friend that also helps me cook some of the meals, goes out with me, hey, let's cook this, get this ready. Like when I came down here, he had my dinners already prepped and planned, so I didn't even have to worry about that. And that being said, obviously, so much of a stress reliever not having to worry about, oh, I have to eat this or plan this or what hydration I need to get in or anything else. It's kind of like they have it already handled, and that's just one thing I don't even have to think about anymore.
One less thing you got to keep on your mind, man. That's good.
I mean, I don't know if that's something you dealt with in the past or not, but that's got to be such a move, like to, you know, not to emphasize everything in once or encapsulize everything in one, but to make the move, change camps, kind of make all this big focus, and now a nutritionist as well. It's got to make this feel way more of a profession now than just a hobby, right? Yeah,
I would agree too. Like, if I was going to take it serious, then obviously I would have had to cut down to 55. That's what my team obviously wanted me to do. Right. So this is the cut to the 55, obviously. But that being said, even with the camp change and everything else, when I cut to 170 for the last fight in particular, I felt like garbage. It was probably one of the worst cuts I've ever had. Just, I don't know. My body wasn't reacting right. I was trying to bro science a lot of this stuff and not eating the right meals or like last minute finding out my fight's off and then finding out the fight's still on the week of. So you have that stress and everything else as well. But just not taking care of things the way it should properly be done. And then on the other hand, having this camp where everything's done to a T, no problems, no worry about anything, and to just do everything super professional, like you just said. Honestly, energy's great. Like, I think I have more energy and I'm like even more well prepared than I was even for the last camp. And I'm cutting weight and I'm smaller and I'm not even eating as much. But because of the way they had me planned and everything else, I feel better than I did the last one.
Yeah, I mean, when you make health a focus like that, it tends to be a thing that comes out of it essentially. But was that a concern for you, being that this was, I don't know if you made any test cuts or anything like that, but when's the last time your boy made 155 before this? You know what I mean?
I'm 5 years. I'm pretty sure it was 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
At least that's what I've been telling everybody. But that was against Gage, my first pro fight. And that was I cut like 8 pounds in an hour right before weigh-ins, and we were even a little late for the weigh-ins. But I remember that was the last time I cut the 55. I've told my team, hey, if I'm going to fight, I'm never cutting to 55. I kept on saying it, and they're like, okay, whatever. Obviously, Ali and Anthony and them guys. And they talked me into going back to 55. But with me doing it seriously, and with them saying, hey, if you really want to do this, let's do it for real. We need you to cut and really get down there. It makes sense, honestly. But with that being said, me taking the years off and just lifting and gaining weight and getting bigger, I didn't think it was possible. But they obviously had a plan for everything, and this is part of that plan.
Man.
8 pounds in an hour, dude. I can't cut 8 pounds in a year. What the fuck?
Dude, I feel like you would be.
man.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. I feel like Jordan might be like, out of the four of us, I think he might be like the one that's like fuck a weight cut. Like, dude, if you would, and the worst of it is, dude, when I was cutting weight to fight, dude, like they didn't have all the sauna suits and shit. You'd have died if you did it the way I did it. I
Dude, you guys should make me like your.
with,
You should make me like a project. You know, like I'll be your guinea pig on fucking mixed martial arts, weight cut, and trying to
like
fight.
I used to do it with hoodie and sweatpants, and then I would wear trash bags and shit under the hoodie and sweatpants, and I would shadow box in the fucking sauna and shit to try to make myself sweat, and then running out in the heat with trash bags and shit on, and then by the end of it, dude, I was so dehydrated because I sweat so much. You just thought I got out the fucking
I like
pool.
pizza and shit, so I'm good.
Mine weren't necessarily the fight days or anything like that, but during the old Pee-wee football days, man, I was already a tall kid at that time. And they had the weight classes, so it was, or weight limit, should I say?
Okay, but here's the only difference with that, though. At least football, you do it in spurts. Like, you do it in spurts. Like, okay, I got time to
you have to stay on weight for a season, basically. Is what you're telling a kid that's already. I would like naturally was 170, and you're like, you have to be 155, dude.
How tall were you in high school?
I've been 6 foot plus since fucking middle school. So
what the hell? Some guys have all the luck.
Yeah. That's what they say, right? But besides the point, I dealt with the same type of shit. I literally remember, like, it wasn't fight related, but it was the same type of, like, I had to coordinate my shits. I had to coordinate like my food intake as a like 12-year-old, and I'm like, dude, this should be illegal. You know, like I understand I'm a big kid trying to play football, but this is obnoxious. I should not have to like regulate my dinners and not eat for like 2 days before so I can play fucking
That's a 12-year-old
Kiwi football, you know, like this is bullshit.
Here, Corey, now let's up that one. Now imagine doing that, having Crohn's disease when you have a hard time eating as it is.
No way, dude.
Dude, I don't miss weight cuts at all. And I've told people, like, if I told you the amount of time since we started doing this show, I get people that'll ask me, bro, so are you ever going to compete again? If I do, it's going to be a jiu-jitsu tournament. But I don't think, dude, I fought at everything from 120 to 125, 135, 145, 155. 155 is probably the biggest I ever competed at. I honestly don't think I could make 125 or 135 again.
With the things you have going on, Kyle.
And then you'll be able to respect this. The last time I did try to cut to make anything like that, the closest to that was 140, and it was for a jiu-jitsu tournament, and then it ended up being me and Tony Barton best 2 out of 3. I was like, what the fuck? So I cut all this weight to fight a motherfucker who was already my number one training partner anyway, so he already knew everything I was going to try to do. So there goes any game plan that we worked on, number one. Number two, you got to fight the same fucking guy twice back to back. Fuck all that. I'm not doing a weight cut again anytime soon. But with that being said, dude,
I don't envy you guys either, man. I respect it though. I respect it because of the like scenarios I went through and stuff. The like not being able to take drinks when you want to and all that type of shit. It's like,
and then it just makes you angry. At least it did me because I was hungry. Dude. I wanted to get it over with.
And I was angry. I was banging metal.
I wanted to fucking fight somebody by the end of it. I'm like, I did all this to make weight. Let's just fucking fight now.
Starving. I'm just thinking about Corey. I'm just thinking about Corey as a 12-year-old kid. The people in the school are probably like, man, your son's not eating.
No, dude, my dad would always get food on the way to the game. And I'd always give him shit. I'm like, dude, you can't get like some concessions or shit, something after
Your
you drop
son's-
me off.
Your
I
child's
haven't
complaining
ate.
he's starving
You
at
know,
school.
I haven't ate. Like, he knows for a fact I hadn't ate at that point, like a day and a half before every fucking Friday or whatever the fuck the kids games were. Kid stuff, but it was so stupid. But that being said, I know at least in part what you guys go through, and it's a wild thing. One question I do have on the weight situation, because I'm always curious when people kind of make that step down in weight.
Yeah.
What was like your high school walk around weight and stuff like that? Like, was this like, are you returning back to like high school levels of weight, or are you even dipping below that potentially?
So I used to be fat, bro.
Well, no offense, I seen a little bit of skin,
No, bro,
it's funny
that you can say that. So like, I don't know if I talked about it the last time we talked, but like, I used to be 260 pounds.
Yeah.
Like 64.
I didn't know it was quite that. But
yeah, I was 264 until I was like 15, and then I got into wrestling, which we talked about in the other one. But when I wrestled my junior year, I was 160. That was my main class, and then on my senior year, I got all the way down to 140. But that was unhealthy and like some eating.
Trying to be a kid doing weight cuts. Yeah,
bro. I was eating like an orange and giant Florida oranges and peanut butter, and that was it.
Gonna eat like a fucking hamster, dude. Well, before we get into this fight and what you got going on and going on this February 1st, talk to me. We talked a little bit about it before we hit the button. Since the last time you've come onto the show, you've been you told us how you moved out to North Carolina. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about your training there and still being linked up with the team here at Detroit Jiu-Jitsu. Talk to me about life in Flair country. I mean, I'm sure you've been down there long enough to find out that you're in Flair country.
So biggest thing is obviously home base is still Detroit Jiu-Jitsu. Obviously I came down here in December to receive my black belt. So that was the last time I was here, and here again for the week of the fight, week and a half of the fight. So doing a little bit of the camp out here, but they're always trying to keep in contact with me what I'm doing in my training. As for my training in North Carolina, I train at a gym called Gamma, which is, a pretty good gym. It's a little smaller, but there's a couple of good guys out there. And one of the ones, if you guys see my Instagram or Facebook or anything else, I coach him a lot. His name is Noah Starowitz. He is the 185-pound #1 in the state at amateurs, and he's about to go pro after his next fight. But that's my main training partner out there. And then they also have a black belt named Jay, who I get to work with as well, and he's really good. And then there's a few other gyms I'll travel, because I live in Greenville. So I travel out to Raleigh as well to get some training. So I'll go to a place called Elevate and also another one called Hometown, and they have a lot more pros there, so I can get my work in as well. But my main training partner out in North Carolina is Noah, and me and him are pretty much just banging every day, trying to get the work in. That kid's going to go pretty far. I can't wait to see what he does with his career in particular, especially him being a little bit younger as well, and then fighting monsters. If you guys get a chance, make sure you guys go check those out, because the dudes he fought were tanks. But that being said, a lot of my training's out there with those guys. Just really working with Noah, and then also, thankfully, I met the people at Gamma, because that hooked me up with that nutritionist and that dietitian as well. With Erin is Jay's wife, and she was my nutritionist throughout the whole camp, did my BMI, basically put me through everything that she wanted me to eat and whatnot. And then also on the other end, I have the guy that basically runs a lot of the programs and the dietitian programs for North Carolina, and his name is Eric. And that dude's been a blessing to me, honestly. He helps me through camp. Hey, you're doing this. Let's work on this. I want you to work hard, kind of like more of the cardio intensity stuff, like your hard drilling that you need to be doing. And he's been my go-to guy that when I need a good push or anything like that, hey, just give me a hard day, figure out a plan, let me do this. That's the guy that sets it up for me, gets me ready to go. But that's basically how the training's been out there. Honestly, it's been great, especially with these younger guys. They're very hungry. So them seeing me in there, they're trying to absorb as much knowledge as possible, and they're just trying to train hard. They never half-ass it, I guess. And they're always trying to, like, even if they feel like, they're about to give up or anything else. Thankfully, I work with guys that are like bulldogs almost. They just want to keep on coming back. You can tap them, or even beat them up in the sparring. 2 seconds later, they're coming right back at you, which is what I wanted. Like, yeah, the technique's cool. If you guys have really good technique, that's great. You're going to get some good work here or there. But I need those grinders, those guys that work really hard, like how we have here at Detroit Jiu-Jitsu. And thankfully, I found a few guys, even if it isn't a lot, not a lot, like how we have here at DJJ. All I need is a few guys just to keep on pushing and working.
Yeah. Well, you brought up something else. Talk to me about that. That's something that we talked about on Thursday with or on Tuesday with Sammy the Heat Worthington last week. We were talking about when you're training for a fight, how much because everybody's different, you know. You hear it with guys like Max Holloway and stuff like that, where they talked about where they had to basically like stop sparring at a certain point because they were taking so much damage because of the all the sparring they were doing. Which, I mean, you know, the era that I come from because you know who I used to train with when I first started. And when I first started, sparring was basically like what you did, pretty much. Like, you know what I mean? Like, everybody was sparring, everybody was beating the shit out of each other. But I feel like as the game has evolved and we've seen the evolution and learned more about like CTE and things like that, for you, how much is a good level of sparring for you? Like, do you like to spar all the time? Is it one of those things where you spar a little more towards the beginning of camp and then you taper it off, like, you know, once you get closer? Because we hear a lot of like conflicting things with everybody else. Like, everybody does their camp different, how much they like to spar. But that's one thing I think we've seen a lot of change in the world of MMA, not just MMA, but boxing too. Just like the pure and sheer amount that people are sparring. Like, for you, are you still somebody who likes to spar heavy, or is it like a few weeks out you kind of are worried more about like fine tuning stuff?
So I guess like sparring, the way I think about it in particular, we obviously came from the same spot. Those guys were a little bit more intense and everything else, and your sparring was way harder a lot of the time. So out here, especially at Gamma and DJJ as well, with having Ali, he tapers me back. I'm like a Sean Strickland. I want to keep on sparring. I want to spar hard and just keep on going because I'm nuts. That being said, you got to have those people, and Eric is a good example for this. The guy I was telling you about, he's the one that always says, hey, you're redlining. I need to pull you back because you'll redline until you fucking die. So that being said, he always reels me back in. But a lot of my sparring, honestly, it's very high intensity, but the power, it's very low. You're not trying to kill each other, especially when you have, like, let's say it's an MMA day. You got the bubble gloves on, everything else. You're going to crack each other if you really try to hit. So that being said, your power is maybe not as much, maybe 50 or 30, depending on who you're going with or what skill level they're at. But the speed, the technique, the takedowns, everything else, that's like at 100. You want to get your positions. You want to work your technique and everything else. Yeah, we're going to get cracked here and there when you got your boxing gloves on and you're doing some real sparring and whatnot. But those days where, oh, you got to be tough and you got to learn to, take those monster shots when you're new, that's not what I need right now. A lot of times, yeah, you're going to be in those situations. Hey, you might travel to one of those gyms. Like I was saying, I travel a bit. You're going to have real sparring rounds because, number one, those guys aren't your friends, really. You're just going in there to get work. Or number two, you're using it to almost set up your skills, too, against somebody that just doesn't care about you as much, which is great. That way, I don't care. You don't care. Let's throw our stuff at each other. But as for my training partners and guys I see a lot, you don't need to kill each other every day unless you're new. If you are new, I feel like that is something you do need. You do need to get those hard sparring rounds, number one, just to feel how it is to get hit and learn your defense from there and feel like you're safe in certain positions, like even high guard or parrying the hands out and working on some stuff. But as you get older and more into the sport and you already had those hard rounds, you can start feeling it out and start pulling it back a little bit and start working stuff. Now, that being said, if you're new, obviously don't spar hard every single time. You need to work your technique. You do those technical rounds or even just work positioning and do stuff like that as well. But there's a time and place for everything, So that's at least the way I think about it.
I like it. Well, with that said, before we get into talking about your fight this weekend, I also saw, and, congrats on this because you and I have trained a bunch in this area, but I heard that you got your black belt. So first of all, congrats on that. I need to quit being a lazy fuck so that I can get mine too, because I've been a purple belt for like a long ass time. But with that being said, talk to me about getting your black belt. Does that give you any more sense of like comfortability as far as fighting goes? Is knowing that you're good anywhere it goes? Like, what are your thoughts on getting a black belt?
Honestly, getting a black belt for me in particular, I don't think it changes like for like skill level or anything else. Because personally, and this no disrespect to anybody or whatever, MMA black belt, like jiu-jitsu wise, compared to just having a black belt in general, it's like apples and oranges. They're two different things. So even when I was at a purple belt, let's say, I feel like my MMA jiu-jitsu was already at that black belt level, right? Obviously, you're going to tune stuff up more. You're going to get more experience. You're going to learn more moves as it goes on and on and on. But I already felt really comfortable with my jiu-jitsu, especially in MMA in particular. But the biggest thing for me getting my black belt, it was just a overwhelming thing. It was very awesome because I've been doing, I don't know, martial arts for forever, and it's the one thing I put everything into. Like, I've had to sleep in gyms, I've been homeless, I've had to do a lot of stuff, and I poured my whole life into this dream. So to finally get something that you worked so hard towards, it was very emotional for myself. Like, I don't know, I couldn't even explain it, but like, I feel like personally, it was just an accomplishment for myself. Yeah, it comes with some, some stress here and there, and a lot of people are looking at you in different ways. But honestly, at the end of the day, I just feel like it was more of like a trophy to myself. Like, this is what you did. Congratulations. You put all this time and effort, and you never gave up on the situation in the first place. You believed in yourself, and you knew you could get this dream done. And that was the way, at least, I thought about it personally.
Hey, man, I mean, at the end of the day, that's an accomplishment. That's the thing. People don't understand the amount of time that takes to get a black belt. No disrespect to anybody who's got like a karate black belt or anything like that, but it's just different. Like a karate black belt, I could name you at least 10 or 15 people that I've met over the years that got, karate black belts and things like that. I also could probably do that in jiu-jitsu, but that's also because I'm pretty much nuts deep in MMA and jiu-jitsu and have been for like the last shit. This is, oh my God. Dude, we were just talking about this with Sammy the Heat Worthington, which all of you guys that are checking us out, it says there's about 133 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, drop some comments if you got anything you want to talk about in the comments. But we were talking about that. That's another thing we were talking about the other day with Sammy too, is it's like, dude, like just the way things were back then versus the way they are now. Like, I mean, like I said, you'll see a lot of different people get black belts in karate and be like, yo, I'm a black belt, I'm a black belt, I'm a black belt. But anyone that's actually trained jiu-jitsu at a credible gym knows that if you've got a black belt and you didn't train for like at least 8 or 10 years minimum, then I automatically question like the credentials on your black belt. You know what I mean? Because a black belt in jiu-jitsu is not something that you should just get like, oh, I've trained for a bunch of time and I've done 300 classes, so I'm a black belt.
No,
That's not how it works, huh?
No, I agree with you 100%. Because like you do have those martial arts, like you were just saying, that just try to push the agenda, or they call them like the feeder belts, just to keep you in the system so you keep on paying and everything else. Like obviously you see a lot of that with the American Taekwondo. They always kind of do like the pay to play system a lot of times, especially in like America. They really try to push their belt systems on the kids and the young ones. Like you see a lot of these kids that are like 9 and 10. Yeah, they have flexibility in their hips. They can throw some certain kicks, but they already have black belts and they're starting to help the teacher. But it's a little weird. And obviously I don't know enough. So for me to say anything is kind of like a toss in the wind. But with getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu, anybody who's done it, it's such a hard discipline. I mean, what's the statistics? Like 90% or something like that drop out after getting the blue belt. So that alone, just like, I don't know, just to think about it's like unfathomable, for the people that do stick it out and actually try to do it. Also, another little cool thing, and I completely forgot about it as I was talking, but I'm the first pro fighter to get their black belt from Detroit Jiu-Jitsu. So that was a big, once I got that felt actually pretty awesome. I was very proud of that situation too, to be the first one through this gym. Obviously, they're gonna have way more fighters and stuff like that, but to be the first, that's a big feather in the cap for me.
Well, absolutely. And coming out of a gym like that, I've trained there. So, like, I've trained with a lot of those guys. I've gotten to have roles in there. There's a lot of tough roles. Like the last tournament that I competed in, I went and trained with Garmo and some of the guys over at Detroit Jiu-Jitsu then to help get ready for that. So I definitely can vouch for that and the quality of the people that you have on the mat. But with that being said, I mean, that kind of leads us to the matter at hand this weekend, and that is that you're going to be stepping into the cage with a guy in Collin Anglin, who's not only a UFC vet, he just fought in cage CFFC, training out there with the people out there at Factory X with the likes of Cody Bundridge and Mark Montoya and all those guys that are out there coming from a big camp. We talked a little bit about this before we went live, but the thing that's really intriguing to me about this matchup is that a lot of people asked what I thought about this matchup and did I think that, this was a fair matchup. I feel that it very much so is. And I think, obviously I want to get your thoughts on it, but I feel like really you're in the catbird seat if you really think about it, because you're fighting a guy that's a UFC vet, a CFFC vet, all those things, contender series, whatever. And because of that, most people are going to look and be like, oh yeah, this guy's UFC vet, he's supposed to smash him. So if you lose, it's not the end of the world. If you win, now you've just beaten the UFC vet. I feel like there's a lot more to lose on his plate than there is for you, because if he loses, he just lost to a guy that's in the beginning of his pro career and he's trying to find his way back to the UFC. I mean, what are your thoughts? And have you heard any of that, like headed up to this matchup, like people saying, oh man, are you sure, like with this matchup with him being a UFC vet? And what are your thoughts on this fight?
Honestly, going into it, I have heard that a lot, especially from like a lot of people that have been seeing the fight or just asking questions. A lot of people are curious about fighting anyways. It's a very big thing now. As for back in the day, nobody knew about nothing. Everybody kind of knows a little bit about fighting now, and I feel like it's more mainstream. A lot of people are asking me the same thing, like, hey, this is a UFC vet with a lot of credentials. He went out there, he's fought, even if he has a loss in the UFC or anything else, he made it there. That's what we're all trying to do is, become a UFC fighter. And at the end of the day, nobody's going to take his credentials away. Everybody says this thing like, oh, you're going to take his credentials, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to happen. He did that himself, and that's a great thing that he did. With that being said, I'm also trying to build my own career, and I'm trying to do something with my dream in the sport or anything in general. I think personally the matchup's great. My team's the one who set this up. I believe in them to a T, so whatever they say is what goes. And at the end of the day, there's not much to say. I mean, it's me versus him. Anything can happen. It's MMA, obviously. But all in all being said, and all the cliches and blah, 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 and whatever, I could be out here like, oh, I'm going to knock him out, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And I feel confident in my skills, and I felt confident enough to say yes to take this main event spot and to go out there and put on a show. And that's all I want to do every time is put on a show and make my name known. All right, and all I can do is be real. A lot of these guys are trying to put on this act and be fugazi and blah, 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 or I'm this, I'm that.
Fugazi.
But I'm me. I'm Chase. And people are going to recognize and start knowing me. Like, I'm not going to just be that local cat that's like, all right, well, he's a tough match. I don't know about this fight, this, that, and the other. With this fight and with this publicity, I think a lot of people are starting to recognize who I am, and it's going to start building my name as well.
I agree. I mean, especially with it being here in Michigan, obviously Collin Anglin originally being a SFS guy, coming out of Scorpion Fighting Systems, obviously he's going to have, people in the crowd here in Michigan too, which all the more reason that I think that this is a good matchup for you. Like I said, it's really a win-win situation for you. It's a step up. If you win, you're getting a win over a UFC vet. If you lose, it's not really like skin off your back. But from what I can tell, just from listening to you talk, you already seem locked in, and you already seem to know what time it is. From what you know of Collin Anglin, what do you think is going to be the biggest difference for you on February 1st?
I don't know. I think it's more about composure more than anything. It's just staying composed in the fight. Like, there might be some moments where either me or him end up in a bad situation, right? And the biggest thing is not getting overwhelmed or having to, like, rush the moment and feeling like you have to immediately attack or trying to jump the gun or like, I don't know. Let's say there's a slit. Well, if I start running at him, now I'm getting hit with the shot as I'm coming in, right? Obviously. The biggest thing in this fight in particular, and I think just for anybody who's fighting in any situation, just always stay composed. Try to keep your composure in there. It's nothing bigger. It's another day, all right? At the end of the day, and I want everybody to know, it's not just for my fight. It's 15 minutes, man. If you're a pro, it's 15 minutes. And if you're an amateur, it's 9. Unless you're fighting championships, then we're getting into, like, blah, blah, blah details and everything else, right? But at the end of the day, it's 15 minutes. That's it. All you have to do is just stay relaxed, composed. What's the worst that happens? I mean, obviously there's breaks. You get hurt. You can be knocked out, whatever else, right? But that being said, it's just 15 minutes, guys. Just go out there and do the best you can. Go out there and do your work. Trust in your skills. Every time you do a practice or every time you're in there working hard every day, that's something else you can add to the toolbox, right? So trust in yourself, trust in your skills. That's all you can do at the end of the day.
I like it. I like it. Definitely a good mindset to have going into the fight. Shout out to everybody that's checking in. Says we got about 150 people in here right now. With that said, what's the thoughts? How do you think this fight finishes?
It's MMA. I'm not saying no predictions or nothing else. I'm not Mystic Mac. Could be a good fight. All right, that's all I can say.
He said, "I'm not Mystic Mac." Speaking of Mystic Mac, okay. Well, then, what are your thoughts on what we saw last weekend? I don't think it's very well advised for Mr. McGregor if he's going to take a bare knuckle fight against Jeremy Stevens. What are you?
He's a free agent now, bro.
Yeah.
So because they already bet on Eddie apparently, and they already had some other outside information coming out that the promoter was talking to Eddie before the fight about doing extended contracts as well, from what I heard. So there might be some legal stuff that's about to go down too. As long as Jeremy pursues it, I'm not 100% sure. Like, obviously, we know a little bit from Miles and like from what that team was before, and them two were really close. So I see some of the background stuff.
He's still in his corner now. Like, he's still in his corner now. I mean, I think if anything, this pretty much locks up that, like, I'll put it this way.
Yeah,
I thought that fight was, first of all, that fight was badass. Eddie Alvarez is still a G, first of all. So before I say anything, let's just put that on the table, number one. Eddie Alvarez is still a dog. And the only reason why the guy didn't keep fighting, for those that don't know what happened, like, he literally got his jaw broke with one of those shots. And his corner, stopped the fight. It wasn't him. So let's put that out on the table, number one. But in reference to the things that you said, I feel like this really puts Jeremy Stevens in the catbird seat if you really think about it, because now he's pretty much in a spot where he calls his shot.
Yeah.
Like, if that's the fight he wants, and there's any way that can happen, which I don't think it's going to, because Conor's still under contract with the UFC. So I don't think that that's a fight that they would let him do.
It could in the future, though. It could be a carrot they dangle.
Is Conor still going to be able to take that fight in the future? We're talking about the future when the guy hasn't had a credible win in 10 years.
He doesn't have to win. He just has to fight twice. So
What do you mean he doesn't have to win? If he comes in and gets smashed in bare knuckle, no one's going to want to see him do it again.
I'm not talking
two fights in
I'm
UFC,
talking about,
right?
Yeah, I'm talking about his
Yeah,
UFC.
that's why I'm
what
saying he's got to get through those.
He could get smashed in those, and I don't think people would still. If you say,
I'm still watching.
Connor, if you say Connor's fighting Jeremy Stevens bare knuckle, you're like, all right, can't not watch that, So you know what I mean?
That dude's friggin' nuts.
It doesn't matter. Like, same thing. We're gonna get to it later, but like the Tony Ferguson thing now with the GFL thing. Like, I'm still interested in whoever they match him up with at now 165 for their weight classes and stuff. I'm still curious.
I love Tony Ferguson, but I'm not after that last fight. I just don't want to see him get
understandably
beat up no
so.
We talked about that a lot, dude.
We'll move to that once we get to that topic. But for the bare knuckle side, I think there's still some very interesting fights for Jeremy Stevens. That while you guys brought up the contract whole thing, I don't know what kind of ramifications or whatever you were talking about with that. I didn't see anything with that, but I know as for people not being signed and stuff like that to follow up with, Ben Rothwell wasn't signed to another deal after either. So he's in negotiations as well right now, and he knocked out
he's got the belt, and that was a bad motherfucker, dude.
6 seconds or some shit. That was a crazy
shot. Was a bad motherfucker because the way that
I think sorry, Kyle, but I think that the way that they planned it might not have worked out, but the way that it worked out still worked out for them in a way. They're going to have to pay people. They already do. That's kind of the name of the game to get people to, bare knuckle box at
they
this
pay
current
some
point.
People from what I've heard, because I've also heard people making not a lot of money to go do
True.
those.
But I think people like
and this ain't hating on BKFC. If anybody from there hears this, I'm a big fan of BKFC. We've had both of their female champions on the show. We've had multiple of their fighters on. I want to see BKFC do well.
A couple of the fighters that we talked to in person, I don't want to mention any names, but hung out with up north, if you'll know who I'm saying, Kyle. He said he was making pretty good money. He was happy with what he was pulling, and he was coming.
Yeah, but it's getting
contract.
the fight.
Yeah,
like look at a guy like Mohawk. Mohawk was there at the fight, and he's been like not necessarily next up for the title shot. But he's been like right there,
missing in action, and you haven't seen him in a year. So
he also had, was it an aneurysm or a blood clot or something that happened that he had to? He had to get through that. He's been cleared now, and it sounds like he's got a fight going because I know they had him there in Philly. He was at the fight.
Oh, he was at Philly. Okay.
Yeah, him and his wife went there to
break the fourth wall. That's who I was referring to. He was saying when we were hanging out with him that he was pretty happy with his contract and he was due for another contract. So that being said, like. He kept winning, so I'm sure the money kept climbing. I don't know to what degree. I don't necessarily know, but that being said, I do remember him saying he was saying for where he felt like he was at in his career before that to where he was now all of a sudden 2-3 wins in BKFC. He was all he was happy. It seemed like at least. If I remember correctly.
I will say this, though. The thing that was cool with that fight to me is hearing the numbers of at least what they're saying was projected for the amount of people that they had there in Philly at the Wells Fargo Center. Like, I've been there. I was there for, was it Raw last year when we were there for WrestleMania? That's where they did, like, Raw and SmackDown. So I went to a couple events in that building. And so for them to pack that bitch out with 17,000 people and for it to be them and not like UFC or anything like that, I think it's definitely good for them as a company. I think it's good for them as a brand. But I definitely feel like some of those fights definitely went different than how they might have hoped. I definitely think that there was a lot of hope that Eddie Alvarez was going to be like the big hometown king with it being Philadelphia. And Jeremy, sure did a good job of playing the heel because Dude, I literally tagged past guest of the show, Dave LaGreca from Busted Open on Sirius XM and Bubba Ray Dudley. And I was like, bro, you guys always talk about hot Philly crowds when you talk about ECW. They were straight chanting, fuck you, Stevens. The whole
that was a wild one. That crowd was lit. The whole thing with, like you say, the attendance that they were able to pull and stuff. I think it's a big win, not only for BKFC. Of course, it's a huge win for BKFC. It seems like every year when Knucklemania rolls around, we have this same conversation of it's going to be a big thing. It's really catching on, guys. Look at what they were able to do. And it's another year and it's another thing. And this time, to your point, Kyle.
And I want them to do well. Like, don't mistake what I'm saying. Just because I said people are getting paid on a different pay scale, like, I want them to do well. I enjoy the bare knuckle stuff. So like, let's just put that out.
I know you're not shitting on them. Yeah, I know you're not shitting on them. But to see where their growth has continued to get them to, I think it's a huge win for combat sports. You hear all the time where people say there's no second place to really be able to go in, make some money as somebody who maybe for whatever reason, maybe your manager just doesn't get along with the UFC. Maybe you had your, not to bring up your opponent, but maybe a Collin Anglin, somebody who had their chance, unfortunately didn't go their way. Where's their second route nowadays? And I think, of course, nobody's like, oh, I now got to immediately fight bare knuckle. But to see that there is another inroad where people can now make that kind of money again and become a champ and sell out huge venues and stuff like that, if they can continue this success, I think the big thing for bare knuckle, and I think they're kind of using this card up their sleeve right now with not having Perry on this event, is I think they're going to move it to maybe a biannual or maybe even like quarterly bigger event type of deal like what we just seen. So
I
that
just
way,
wish that they'd still make it so that you could buy the pay-per-views on the BKFC app.
Yeah, I know.
My only thing is I already pay all motherfuckers for the BKFC app, and then you want me to buy the DAZN app, and I got to buy the pay-per-view on DAZN too?
Yeah.
Man, fuck all that.
Get your logistics together.
But if you're, if they're going to put on cards like this,
dude, I'm cool with that. Knucklemania lived up to what it was supposed to. Like, literally, I think every fight, if I'm not mistaken, there were only 2 fights on the whole card that went to decision. Like, every other one of them was a fucking knockout.
I think if they can do what they did tonight, where they find a really good main event, or not tonight, but the other night, where they have somebody that's a really good main event enough to draw star attention. Now that they got Ben Rothwell as a champ, throw him on there.
That Beck Rawlings and Taylor Starling fight.
Yeah,
that was a fucking fight. Now, you want to talk about crossroads fights? That's the crossroad fight because Taylor Starling's one of their biggest stars. But what does she do now?
Yeah,
because she lost.
I think she's fine because it was such a heart performance.
I'm not saying they're going to get rid of her, but I'm saying you can't just put her in another title shot or another number one contender shot. If anything, Beck Rawlings has got to go back up there. So it's like I don't know who the next opponent was for her, but as far as fights,
what I was saying though, to round out my point at least, is if they can continue to do this maybe quarterly or triannually, biannually, have some way where they're continuing to generate this kind of interest in their product and what they're able to do and bring good athletes in. If they're able to also sprinkle these cards in with some of their champs that are their homegrown talent and stuff that are the people that we as fans of bare knuckle already are kind of familiar with, but the people that tuned in to watch Eddie Alvarez versus Jeremy Stevens will now maybe figure out that this guy just put on a crazy performance. If they can continue to do that and keep it more frequent, man, I think they've got a real winner. It's just the frequency. You can't run one big card like this a year and then be like, all right, there we go. Right. Especially with that level of success. Once you've seen that the success is there to be had, of course you can't burn it at both ends and just light the whole pile on fire. But you definitely got to lean into it. I know they were talking about that $25 million tournament thing that they're talking about. I don't know the details are still
that sounds interesting to me because I've heard some fights thrown around like who did I hear? I heard Ben Rothwell and Mark Hunt talking shit about that they want to do a bare knuckle fight. Get the fuck out of here. Take my money. I don't care who wins and if it only ends in like 2 minutes. Just the fact that them two are gonna fight bare knuckle, dog. Let's get it.
I'm really curious when they talk about this level of money and tournament. Does that mean that they're doing like every weight class gets $5 million and then like do we do open weight at the end, and whoever wins that gets another 5 million or some shit like that, or how? Because I know he said it's not like an individual prize of 25 million; it's dispersed throughout the like length of it.
Right.
But he didn't really
Still,
give any other
5 million's
details.
probably more than a lot of them guys ever got a crack at in the fucking
absolutely.
fight.
I'm not shitting on that amount of money at all. Like the fact that he's willing to do that, I'm really curious what that ends up being is kind of what I'm getting at. He's got some big things that he's talked about, you know, on the Ariel Helwani show and the likes, you know, throughout the last couple, you know, leading into this Knucklemania. So we'll see what 2025 really presents for BKFC and Bare Knuckle as a whole. You know, we've had BYB CEO on here as well. And
speaking of which, stay tuned. I heard there's a guy who might have hands of stone that might be joining the show soon.
Yeah.
But
and they've had some real growth too. But I think this next year, for what that sport's shown itself to potentially be, could just really hit some new peaks. Honestly.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of growth, I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of the other fights. One of the other fights that's happening this weekend, as well as your thoughts on the GFL. So before we let you get out of here, what do you think on these fights that we got this weekend? You got Israel Adesanya versus Imavov, and then you've got MVP versus
Shara Bullet.
Yeah, Shara Bullet versus MVP. You got any thoughts on them fights, Chase?
So as for Israel and obviously Imavov, I mean, is he supposed to win on paper, right? That's basically what everybody's saying. That's what everybody's going about. I don't know, man. He's kind of like the dark horse in that division right now, at least in my opinion. Like, you got your Vittorias and everybody else that are kind of circulating, and those the guys are kind of like leaders right now, I guess, for the up-and-coming guys, or the ones that they're trying to circulate in. I think he might actually beat Izzy, if I'm being honest. If it goes decision, I actually think he's going to get the snub on it. I don't know why. It's just something I'm thinking. But obviously, if it stays on the feet and they're just doing a striking battle, Izzy's going to pick him apart. Like, it's like cake, honestly. And that's just my kind of opinion on that fight. Obviously, it's horseshoes and hand grenades. It doesn't really matter. But that's what I would think. And then as for the MVP fight, I don't see him beating Shara. I mean, Shara,
I don't either.
Just that new hype. He's got a lot of knockouts. And I think with his style in particular, with that kickboxing style and able to stay on the outside and move the angles, instead of him just darting forward, which is what MVP kind of needs a lot of the times, I think he will get it done pretty quick. Plus, his ground game isn't that bad. Like a lot of the grappling matches that I've seen with him, or like some of his training footage and stuff like that, he actually has some pretty good grappling. And I think if it came down to it and he felt like he was overwhelmed with some of the striking, which I don't think it will happen personally, I think he would result and go to a little bit of that grappling just to set up his kickboxing again. And that was my opinion pretty much on that. Like those two fights in particular.
I'm with that, dude. I'm kind of leaning the same way as you. Like, quite frankly, like MVP's flashy and all that, but I always said during his run, myself personally, I feel like in Bellator, they gave him a lot of matchups for him to look good. Anyone who says that that's not the case, I feel like they weren't watching that objectively. Yeah. There was a lot of guys that he was supposed to beat. He's gotten tougher fights since he was in the UFC. We spoke about BKFC. We saw him lose in the BKFC as well. I'm looking forward to that. I think Izzy can win this fight, and like you said, should win this fight on paper. But again, as anybody that watches this show knows, I talk about momentum all the time. Yeah. Imavov has been a killer for a while. Izzy has been trying to kind of like re-find his footing for a while. I feel like this is a crossroads fight for him. I think he needs to win this fight. And the same with MVP, really. Like Shara, dude, Shara's going to be a fucking problem. Like, yeah, I'm just saying, like, as soon as I saw that matchup, I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that for MVP, man.
I got one more question, I guess, because I didn't even think about this. Is Shara's not 170 either, is he? He's 185, right?
Yeah, MVP moved up for this one.
185.
Yeah, for this
that's
one,
another reason.
He said it's
that Shara would be able to throw him around. To be honest,
strong dude.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's got that knockout power at 185. I guess we'll find out. Obviously, like we talked about, it's MMA. Anything can happen. Any shot goes through, and especially with how explosive MVP is.
Yeah,
if he was to knock somebody out, that would be the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like MVP can still knock people out with that explosiveness. I don't think that's going to go away. But at 85, it's like,
Yeah.
who knows?
And against a guy like that, that's so unorthodox, number one, but also can get it done on the feet or the wrestling, because that's the thing that stuck out to me with this fight, is that if at any point Shara feels like, okay, this guy is throwing like, you know, some unorthodox shit that I can't get, you know, the timing on or whatever, I feel like he could take MVP down most likely.
Yeah.
And I don't think that MVP's wrestling is going to be good enough to really stop that. So, like, I kind of feel like Shara has the ace in the hole as far as that fight goes.
For me, at least, I feel like for both of these, Israel, same kind of deal. Like you guys were saying, I don't think he's quite as big of a hole as you guys like.
I'm not saying he's in a hole. If he loses this fight, though, what's next for him?
Well, it's 3 in a row. It's 3 in a row.
That's why
if he
I'm
loses
saying.
it. I know, but the last two are asterisks because they're title bouts, and you know, one of which was definitely a lackluster performance from him against Sean Strickland. I think if you ran that fight back a couple other times, I think we'd see a definitely different outcome, or at least now that Izzy has seen what that fight would be, I think he would be able to adapt to that significantly in a different type of fight. Not that I'm not a fan of Strickland. I think Strickland could absolutely still win. I'm not saying like it was a fluke or something like that. I'm
3
just
losses
saying,
is 3 losses, bro.
No, and that's what I'm rounding my point to, Kyle, is that he lost to DDP after that, the guy that ultimately beat Strickland. You've seen the likes of Robert Whitaker and Israel both kind of come out and just say it's so hard to deal with that clubbing, awkward style that he just breaks up the when you think you're so good at striking and you're so good at setting things up, and then all of a sudden here comes a freaking
rock hands,
like,
bro.
Yeah, it's like, how do you deal? You know, like you're set up, you got this right hand about to come, and then just it's like what? Yeah, and DDP gets away with it. I mean, he's a big guy for the weight class, and he's relenting. He just is always on people. So that being said, I think this one is a more tailored to him bout in the fact that Imam Nasruddin, I'm gonna
he gets the first name right better than the last name. I feel like his first name's harder to say.
First name, I was going to cry. I was like,
yeah, I was about to say he's the only one that gave a shot.
Nasruddin's easy.
He can say the first name, but
he's Bob. I
he's the only one that gave it a
shot. But I feel like for him, when I was looking at my phone last, I was pulling up his record, and I mean, he's on a hot streak. To your point, Kyle, he really is kind of like looking like he, in my untrained,
and he was a killer in Bellator too. If I'm not mistaken,
in my untrained ass eyes, when I first watched him kind of make his ascent in the division, when they kept feeding him against like these guys, these like top tier, like it seemed like they were really pushing him to be that next guy really quick. He was getting wins, but it was kind of like decisions, and I wasn't overly impressed. In his last couple, man, his win against Cannonier and his win against Brendan Allen, both of those, man, he just looked like he has really stepped his game up to a different level. He looks like he deserves a fight like Israel Adesanya type of fight now. That being said, I still feel like Izzy losing those last 2 fights doesn't particularly mean that much, other than, like you say, if it ends up being a loss in this one, now you have to say you lost 3 in a row. I feel like Izzy is still just as dangerous. I feel like he's going to bring that game. His style and the way that he snapped on all of his punches, I feel like he's starting to get older. He's starting to just lose that type of like athletic prime, like the MMA prime, if you want to say. But that being said, I feel like it's a total perfect match to see who's ready to stay in that upper echelon of the division. I feel like my gut says Izzy's going to be able to turn a corner in this one. I feel like Imavov, even though I've been super impressed with him, I still don't feel like he's necessarily championship level just yet. I feel like he's showing them levels of.
But I think that's what this fight's for.
Yeah,
if he beats
what I'm
Izzy,
saying.
I think that's what
Well,
the UFC's.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying my opinion is I feel like he is right there. He's just, I feel like my opinion is Izzy will be able to hold him off come Saturday. But for Sharp Bullet MVP, I feel like maybe I'm disrespectful, maybe I'm messed up in the head, but I feel like MVP is going to be able to land a shot on a one-eyed feller. I mean, call me crazy.
And that win streak,
that's a hell of a take. This guy don't
sure
bet
make
money,
sure you
but
put
that
some
would
money
be the
on
one to
that
put some
one,
money
bro.
on.
Better yet, send it to me. I'll put it on there. I got you. Don't worry about it.
Hell, I won some money off of Marab. I tried to tell people. You can see it here on this show. I told you exactly what the fuck was going to happen. And Corey's sitting there. He's like, man, it happened just like you said it was going to. I said he wouldn't be able to handle the pressure.
You play some on that one, Kyle?
Yes, I did, and won me
go.
some fucking money. Shout out to Ryan McKinnell and the homies over at MMA Today, because apparently my homie Dre from ESPN, Andreas Hale, bet the same way as I did. Great
Don't
minds
forget,
think alike.
that fight card Saturday starts early, so get your Wheaties, man. That's a 9 a.m. prelim fight.
Fuck that, bro. They
Since-
asked us to do a watch along for that, and I was like, bro, I got to do commentary for fights that
for the
night
main
too.
card.
You gotta love it. But dude, we've kept you a while here. Last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on before we get your final thoughts on the fight are, what do you think about all the talk of this new GFL, man? Like all the people that they've signed, they had the draft and everybody got drafted to their teams now. We're seeing a lot of guys and girls that left MMA that are coming back, like Paige Van Zandt, like Corey mentioned, to Tony Ferguson. I'm never against people making their bag. My only problem is that, boy, did they make this look like it's the fucking retirement home.
Yeah.
Oh, all the AI stuff and everything else too.
Oh yeah.
That
Impossible to avoid.
Bro, I got nothing to say. I hope the best. I hope the best to all these fighters. They're nice people. I met, Chris Weidman at one of the shows that I was just coaching at from a friend Noah. Like I said, there's some good people. I hope they get paid. I hope it does work out well, and I hope they can bring new people with bigger credentials and some up and coming stars, and they build something out of this. Obviously, that's what all of us fighters want us to do, because that way we're all getting paid more. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a career, get some money out of this at the end of the day. That being said, though, it's kind of looking rough. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be 100% honest. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it, because I do have a teammate that is signed to the GFL, and I'm wishing her the best with it being Randy Fields.
Yeah.
You mentioned, obviously, what's her face? Paige. She is probably, by the way it's looking, I think that their team are going to be matching up against each other. So I think they might be fighting each other first. I'm not 100% sure. But
hell of a fight for Randy.
That's all I'm saying too. So for these younger people, or for these people that don't have those credentials and everything else, it's a great boost. At most, you're fighting somebody that had all this stuff going on, everything else. Almost like my situation, right? So that's why I think it's good for the ones that are, don't have the craziest records. But the ones that do, make your bag, do your thing. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this promotion. Whoever's investing in it, maybe they have some sensible ideas, and it might be something great. I don't know. But how many times have we seen that work out?
Yeah.
Facts.
I don't love the not pointing you towards your direction or anything, actually more towards the MMA media. But I don't love the constant negativity that I've seen towards it. I agree the AI sucked. You run that in the open of the show as a show opener. You don't pump that in every 5 minutes to continue to get critiqued on it. It's one thing you show it once. That's the look at, let's get it going. This is some of the athletes we got, but to just keep feeding us that same AI product with the song and, the whole dance and jive, that sucked. The desk talent thing, the whole draft thing, I feel like it showed room for improvement. I feel like Schaub did pretty good on it. I feel like Robin Black personally just isn't my cup of tea.
Mine either.
I no offense, because I think he does a good job.
I'm not hating on a guy. He's been in the sport way longer than me, but he's never been my cup of tea.
I think his style is just not mine, and no hate out there towards it. But that being said, I feel like they tried to do a good thing. I think the draft getting basically leaked or whatever, the pre thing that flashed on the screen and Twitter was going crazy about, huge mistake. If you're going to try to generate all this like talk and buzz and stuff, you do not want your talk and buzz to be about how this draft that you just had us all sit through for 2.5 hours was basically a staged thing just so you could get people talking about it. Not a great look. Not the way you want to get things started. Not to shit on them, because I'm a fan of what it could be. I don't want to run on for too long about it. I like what the matchups could be and stuff like that for the future. I like what it could be. I think that if the cards are played out right, if not all the money is just spent up instantly, I think if this plays out for 3 or 4 seasons and we end up seeing influx of newer names where people are actually starting to tune in, like kind of what we were just saying with the BKFC, you have this initial run of, yes, it's a bunch of older guys. Yes, it's a bunch of, maybe but it's people at least like me who have been watching fights for my whole damn life care enough still about most of these guys that they want to see them still fight against other guys of the same ilk. It's not like they're taking on, there will be those matchups like you were saying, Chase, where it's like, 26-year-old prospect coming up against them, but more of them, because they're saying it's going to be cherry-picked matchups. They're matchmaking these teams. It's not like it's just like pull a card from one team and pull another one. So I feel like we're going to see some good matchups against some good legends. So they get to fight each other. They get a check on the way out. It's a way for the GFL to get some eyes on the promotion, at least in the first year or two, to kind of get the ball rolling. I hope they don't just end up relying on old fighters forever. That's kind of my concern. But I love to see the potential. I like to see that there's money being thrown around in MMA again for athletes out there. I'd love to see that there's another hand being dealt for people. I don't love the constant questioning. Every time it gets brought up on the Ariel show, he's literally saying like, oh, we'll be lucky if they see 2 events, IFL and stuff. All that shit's 10, 15 years old at this point. The world's changed. Everything's so different now. If they're able to hit the ball rolling and actually get success, and people cared enough to tune in. I know like their draft thing was spread all over the place, but it had a ton of viewers at certain points and stuff like that. So there's interest there. There's athletes there that, past their prime or not, people care to watch. So I hope the best for them. And I think that the format could be interesting down the line, especially if people do start to care in New York that New York's playing. I think they did it a little wrong with the team format. I know I'm going long here, but I think they did it a little wrong with the team format. I think they should have picked smaller towns where people care more, that they have their own team compared to a New York or, a Dubai or something like that. I don't think those type of people are going to be, oh, wow, we have another sports team here. But, if you brought it to some smaller town, they would rock your merch and give a shit. But that being said, I think there's potential for growth, and I like the potential for what the team format could be. We'll see how it plays out after a couple, a full season or at least a couple events. I just don't like the constant shitting on it that we're seeing before anything has even come to fruition.
I'm with you, man. Well, shit. Kyle said we're cutting here because he had some technical difficulties. But anyway, Chase, you got any last words for your opponent this weekend, man? Let them know. Let them know where they can find you on all social media as well.
Basically, the last thing I got to say is I appreciate you guys having me on. Honestly, it's always fun talking to you all. So, thanks for having me on. And anybody who wants to get on my socials, right there at the bottom, CK Militia. Make sure you guys reach out. I'm not hard to find, and don't be afraid to shoot a message. All right, appreciate y'all.
Thanks, man. Thanks for your time, man. I don't know how we're gonna cut because Kyle's not even in the thing anymore, so I can't cut the damn stream. So I don't know what he wants me to do here. I don't know what's going on there because he said, hey, I'm having some issues.
I'm right here. This is another episode of Knockouts and 3 Counts. I'm just dealing with some technical difficulties and some things. But with that being said, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys check everything out.
this week we are going to be live and in living color for everything for the Clarissa Shields fight. So if you guys are checking that out, make sure you stay tuned. I'll be at the press conference. Yeah, ring the bell. Get you a fucking shirt. We still got plenty of those shirts. Chase, I'll bring you one this Saturday. Make sure you ring the bell. We got the heavyweight title fight this Sunday. I'm saying Saturday because it's always Saturday. But this Saturday, Corey and I will be on the call for Chase's fight. Sunday, you've got the gloat. Clarissa Shields is going to be defending that heavyweight strap against Danielle Perkins in Flint, Michigan. We'll be there for that. And you've got the Royal fucking Rumble is this weekend. So this Thursday, we're going to have our Royal Rumble preview. I'm still kind of bummed that I'm not going to be in Indy, but I've got a lot of shit to go on this week, and we've got to make our picks for the Royal Rumble. And Corey's got to make his posthumous pick to see if he's going to keep that fucking belt that he's got behind him. So in the next time and in the in-between time, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Peace.